Okay, so we start today the Gemara on the second wide line on the Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara here brought a situation of a mavoi in an alleyway that's not straight through and through. It has two openings to a Reshus Harabim, but it's not straight through. You can see it actually in the Rashi right over here. It's shaped like a ches. So it has two openings to the Reshus Harabim, and the Gemara said there was a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel what you're supposed to do about this mavoi. According to Shmuel, this is considered to be a closed mavoi, even though it is open from both sides, but because it turns twice, so therefore he says it's considered to be a closed mavoi. Rav says it's considered to be an open mavoi. However, the way you deal with it is you have to put up a tzuras pesach. You have to put up two lechis, two side posts, and a kaira and a crossbeam on the top, which creates a tzuras pesach, and that's good enough.
And which one?
And you have to put it by the turns. If you take a look here in the Rashi, where the mavoi turns, so you see you have over there, it says deles. According to Rav, you don't need two doors over there. You just need a tzuras pesach. Okay? So the Gemara said though that we're going to be machmer, both like Rav and like Shmuel. We're going to be machmer like Rav to consider this to be an open mavoi that's going through and through and open on both sides of the Reshus Harabim. And we're also going to be machmer to require two doors by each turn of the mavoi. So two chumras, even though there's an argument here, and we're choosing the chumrah of Rav and the chumrah of Shmuel. So now the Gemara is going to get into a general discussion whether this is something that we do. When you have two arguments, and in one place you choose the chumrah of one, and in another place you choose the chumrah of another, and you apply two chumras, even though if you're choosing Rav, you should go all the way with Rav, both, whether it's l'chumrah, whether it's l'kula. Or if you're going with Shmuel, you should go according to Shmuel, whether it's l'chumrah or l'kula. Here we're choosing the chumrah of each one. So the Gemara brings a braisa that seems to be saying that we don't do that. Frek the Gemara, second wide line. Do we do this? Do we take and choose the chumrah of one and a chumrah of another? Vatanya, we learned the following thing in a braisa. La'olam halacha kebeis. We always will paskin like Beis Hillel. Then the braisa says, v'haraitze lasa is kedivrei Beis Shammai. If you want to follow Beis Shammai, oise, you're allowed to. You can do like Beis Shammai. Kedivrei Beis Hillel, if you want to follow like Beis Hillel, oise, you can do like Beis Hillel as well. Mikule Beis Shammai umikule Beis Hillel, but if you're going to choose to take the leniencies of Beis Shammai and the leniencies of Beis Hillel, then Rasha. Then you're a Rasha. You stop taking all the leniencies. So that's a Rasha. Michumre Beis Shammai or michumre Beis Hillel, but if you're going to be extra from and you're going to only take the chumris of Beis Shammai and the chumris of Beis Hillel, all of Akasavayim regarding you, the pasuk says, Haksil b'chaysha chaylach. A fool walks in darkness. Why is it a fool if he wants to be extra machmer? So we'll see soon Rashi, the Gemara will explain why he's a fool. Elo, iki Beis Shammai, if you're going to follow Beis Shammai, kekuleyan and kechumreyan. You have to follow Beis Shammai, whether it's a kula, whether it's a chumrah. Iki Beis Hillel, if you're going to follow Beis Hillel, kekuleyan and kechumreyan. You'll follow Beis Hillel, whether it's a kula, whether it's a chumrah. This is the braisa. So before the Gemara comes to the question that it has over here, on the fact that we choose both a chumrah of Rav and a chumrah of Shmuel, the Gemara first explains the words of the braisa itself. Ha gufa kashya. The braisa seems to contradict itself. Amrit, first you say, La'olam halacha kebeis Hillel. That's the beginning of the braisa. We always paskin like Beis Hillel. V'hada amrit. Right after that, what do you say? Haraitze lasa is kedivrei Beis Shammai yaiseh. If you want to follow Beis Shammai, you can follow Beis Shammai. You have a choice. You can follow Beis Shammai or you can follow Beis Hillel. So what's going on? Answers the Gemara, Lo kashya. This is not a question. Kan kaidim baskoil, kan la'acha baskoil. Over here, when we say you can follow Beis Shammai, this is before there's a baskel that came out and said that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. As Rashi here quotes, this is actually here in Masechta Eiruvin on Daf Yud Gimel, there was a baskel that said we have to paskin like Beis Hillel. So before that baskel, you can follow even Beis Shammai as well. And kan la'acha baskel. After that baskel came out, so then we paskin only like Beis Hillel, and that's the beginning of the braisa, La'olam halacha kedivrei Beis Hillel. So Taisus over here asks the question. There's a famous Gemara in Bab Metzia that says, "Ei mashgichim bebaska." We don't listen to any baskel regarding paskening a halacha. So how can we say over here that you pasken like a baskel? So Taisus gives two answers. The second answer of Taisus is that in that case in Bab Metzia, when it said not to listen to a baskoil, is when there was a machlokes and they didn't know who to paskin like, and they didn't have any basis to paskin like one opinion over the other, and they were just going to base the psak halacha completely on the baskoil. That you can't do. Over here, Beis Hillel was the majority. Beis Hillel was talking more than Beis Shammai. They're supposed to paskin like Beis Hillel. Elamai, we know the Gemara tells us Beis Shammai were sharper, they were smarter. So even though they were a minority, but they were very, very strong with their opinion. So it wasn't so easy to actually paskin like Beis Hillel, even though Beis Hillel was a majority. So the baska was just to support Beis Hillel to paskin like Beis Hillel, but they weren't basing the psak on the baska. The basis of the psak was the fact that that was the majority opinion. Okay, let's go weiter. The Gemara says another pshat here. What's the reason the Braisa says that you could paskin like Beis Shammai? Vi Beisema. Or we can say, ha v'ha la'acha baskel. Either way, this Braisa is talking about after the baskel says the paskin like Beis Hillel. The Rabbi Yeshua but the opinion that says that you can still do like Beis Shammai, it follows Rabbi Yeshua. What does Rabbi Yeshua say? The loy mashkach bebaskel. Rabbi Yeshua says you don't pay any attention to a baskel. Which according to the Tosfos that I just said, what that would mean is that not only do you not pay attention to a baskel in a case where you're going to completely base your psak din on a baskel, even when you're using your baskel just as a support. And really you have another reason to paskin like Beis Hillel, but nevertheless, whatever baskel there is, you have to completely tune it out. As if the baskel doesn't exist at all. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yeshua, we completely disregard the baskel. And therefore you could still follow Beis Shammai's opinion if you want. Yibai Seima, a third pshat the Gemara says, Hachikama. This is the way you have to read the Braisa. Kol heiche de mishkachas, trei tanoi. Anytime you'll have an argument amongst two tanoim, utre miroi, or two amiroim, the pligia hadadi that argue with each other. Ke'en machlokes Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel, similar to the machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, loy liyevet ki kulei demar. Do not take all the kulas of one opinion, v'chikule demar, and also the kulas of the other opinion. Don't combine, don't use only the kulas. V'loi kechumre demar, v'chichumre demar, and don't collect only the chumris. Ella, rather, oi kikule demar, or kechumre ovid. If you're taking one opinion, you have to follow his leniencies and his stringencies as well. Oi kikule demar, or kechumre ovid. Or you take the other opinion, so you take all of the leniencies and stringencies. So in other words, the Gemara is saying, it's very interesting, even though the Braisa clearly says, V'haroitze lasa is kedivrei Beis Shammai, and or haroitze, if you want to do like Beis Hillel, that part of the Braisa was not talking about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It was talking about any other machlokes, which is ke'en Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And over there, it's telling you that you have to take one opinion all the way. So the Mefarshim say, so why does the Braisa write it in such a way? Why does it say, Haroitze lasa is kedivrei Beis Shammai, if it's not even talking about Beis Shammai? You never paskin like Beis Shammai. The answer is because it says that not until Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel came were there all of these machlokes. Until Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, all the halachas were given down and they were clear without any machlokes. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel was the first time when all of these machlokes regarding all halachas began. So therefore, all future arguments are also considered to be ke'en Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. They were the beginning of this entire thing. Okay, so that's the pshat of this Braisa, third pshat on this Braisa. So now the Gemara concludes and says, Mikol Mokim Kashya. The question over here is, what do we clearly see in this Braisa? That you can't just pick and choose either all kulis or all chumras. You have to take one opinion all the way for whatever it is, for the kula and the chumra. So why before, in the case that we brought down regarding the mavoi, this mavoi that turns twice or once, and there's a question if it's open to the Rishus Harabim or not, does it need doors or does it just need a tzuras HaPesach? Why are we taking the chumra of Rav and the chumra of Shmuel? Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, really we're taking one opinion. Kule kerav of dua. They are following only Rav's opinion. Because Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, halacha ve'ein moirin kain. This that Rav said that the halacha is like the Tanakama. So this goes back to what we learned in Tavav. That Rav said that the halacha is like the Tanakama, that you do not need doors. All you need is a tzuras HaPesach. Rav did say so, but then Rav said, ein moirin kain. But Payal, we don't paskin that way. That is a leniency, but Payal, you should put up doors. So even Rav himself would agree that you need doors. So the Gemara asks, okay, but Rav Ada bar Ava Omar Rav. Rav Ada bar Ava said in the name of Rav, the Omar halacha u'mayrin kain. We paskin that you don't need doors. You just need a tzuras HaPesach and mayrin kain. That's the actual psak din. So we see that we are taking over a chumrah of Shmuel together with a chumrah of Rav. Why are we doing that? Maya Kalamema, what are you going to answer? Rav Shezvi, so Rav Shezvi says a very simple thing. Ki lo yavdinan kechumri de beitrei. When does the Brisa say that you can't pick and choose a chumrah of one and also a chumrah of another? Heiche de sasri adadi. When those two chumras are contradicting each other. You're applying the chumras of two different opinions in a way that the two chumras are a contradiction. You have to choose one opinion. And the Gemara will give an example right now. Over here, by the case of the Eruv, we're discussing two different details, and the fact that you're choosing two chumras are not a contradiction at all. One question is, this mavi which turns, is it considered to be open to the Rishus Harabim or closed? That's one shaila. Another shaila is, a mavi that's open to the Rishus Harabim, does it need a door, or is it just enough to have a tzuras at Pesach? These are two unrelated questions. So if you're going to choose two chumras that are not a contradiction to each other, that's not a problem. So Rashi explains, that's the pshat why it said before in the Braisa, that a person that chooses two chumras is considered to be a fool. Why is he a fool? Because you think you're being frum, but really you're a fool because the two chumras that you're doing are contradicting each other. You have to make up your mind. You can't do two chumras that are a contradiction to each other. There's a similar concept. It's not exactly a chumrah or the same exact concept, but just the point. You have an negayah to a person that wants to daven early ma'ariv, and then he wants to, a late, for Shabbos or even b'chlal, on any day of the week. A person wants to daven mincha and then ma'ariv early. So you're davening mincha after plaga mincha, and then you also daven ma'ariv before shkia. So if you're davening ma'ariv before shkia, it's because you're taking the opinion that once plaga mincha arrives, it's already night. So if you're davening mincha after plaga mincha, it's because you're considering it to be day. So the Gemara says you're allowed to follow the opinion that it's day, you're allowed to follow the opinion that it's night, because we don't know who the din is like, but you can't follow two opinions which are a contradiction to each other. If you're going to daven ma'ariv before shkia, you have to daven mincha before plaga mincha. So similar thing over here. You want to take two chumres, no problem, but as long as they're not a contradiction to each other. Where's an example of two chumres that are going to be a contradiction to each other? So the Gemara brings a Mishnah. Chagain, shedre v'gulgailas. The shedre, the spine, or the skull of a dead body. The Tanan that said in the Mishnah, hashedre v'gulgailas. So if you have a spine or a skull, shachosru, it's missing a part of it. The kam of chisaron. So the halacha over here is, we're talking over here about the tumas mace. So there are three kinds of tumah by tumas mace. We learned this a few times already. There's the tumas maga, if you touch part of the mace, if you carry it, but then there's tumas oil, that if it's under the roof, under the same roof, so then everything becomes tameh. So by tumas oil, it's not tameh unless it's a full part of the body. So if you have a shedre, or if you have a gulgailas, it has to be the full shedre or the full gulgailas. It can't be missing a part of it. So the Mishnah there asks, "V'kama chesarim b'shedre." What's considered to be that the shedre, the spine, is missing, and therefore the tumas oil doesn't apply. B'shama yoyimrim shtei chulyos. If there are two chulyos, how would I say chulyos in English? Could you help me out over there?
Vertebrae.
Well, vertebrae. What's again?
Vertebrae.
Two vertebrae that are missing. So then that's considered to be a chesaron. Beis Hillel yoyimrim. Beis Hillel say chulya achas. If only one chulya is missing, that's already a chesaron. Regarding a skull, like when you drill a hole, you make a hole in something. So if there's a hole that size, it's also considered to be a chesaron. How large is kimloi makdeach? So Rashi says it's larger than a sela. Sela, the coins of those times, it's larger than a sela. Beis Hillel says kedei sheyinotel menachai v'yamus. The size that if in a living person you have this kind of a hole in a skull and he'll pass away, that's the size that's considered to be a chesaron, which is a smaller size. Which is a smaller size, which the tumas mace of an oil will not apply. It's the size of a sela, of that coin in those times. So this is the argument regarding whether the tumas oil applies or not, whether it's considered to be a whole skull or a whole shedder for the tumas oil to apply. Not Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, the exact same achloikis applies to something else. V'chein le'inyan treifa. The same exact machlokes applies regarding treifa. If you have an animal and if you have to see if it has the full limbs of the body, that it could live and it won't die within 12 months, you have the exact same argument. So over here, if you're going to take the chumrah in one case and you're going to want to apply the same chumrah in another case, it's going to be a contradiction regarding a mace, regarding tumas mace, if you're going to take the chumrah and say that only when it's missing two, then the tumas oil goes away, but if it's missing one part of the shedra, the tumas oil doesn't go away, so then that's going to be a kula regarding treifa. So then regarding treifa, it's still considered to be a healthy animal that it could live. So you can't apply the chumrah of Beis Shammai regarding tumas mace regarding the halacha of treifa. Again, by tumas mace, it's considered to be a chumrah that the tumas oil will apply because it's still considered to be a full shedra. And by treifa, it's going to be a kula that the animal is still considered to be healthy and it could still live. If you're going to take the kula of Beis Hillel regarding tumas oil, that it becomes the tumas oil doesn't exist when you take away one chulya, so then that's going to be a chumrah by treifa, that the animal is not healthy enough to live, and therefore it's treif. So you can't apply, this is a case where you can't apply the same chumrah of tumas oil to treifa at the same time. They're contradicting each other. Aval, however, if the two chumras that you're applying are not a contradiction to each other, of dinan, so then you can apply it. It's not a problem to take two chumras. If you want to be frum and take two chumras, gesundheit. Frag the Gemara, is that true? The sasriya hadodi. If you have two chumras that are a contradiction to each other, lo yavdinan, that's not something that a person is allowed to be machmer. I was the Mishnah or the Braisa before called him a fool. Masav Rav Misharshi Maisa Rabbi Akiva. There's a story with Rabbi Akiva Sheliket Esrig. So he took an esrog off the tree. When was it? Be'echad b'shvat. It was on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So we know the famous machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding the new year for the trees. When is the Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos? Beis Shammai says the Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos is on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. What does Beis Hillel say? When's the Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos? Chamishasa b'shvat. So now, what's one of the things that's relevant regarding the Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos? Meister. Regarding Meister. The first and second year of after Shemitah, you give Meiser Sheni. The third year, you don't give Meiser Sheni. The third year, instead of Meiser Sheni, you give Meiser Ani. So now he took off the fruit from the tree on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So it was in that year, it could have either been the second year of Shemitah, or it could have been the third year of Shemitah. If it's already Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos, like the opinion of Beis Shammai, so it's already the third year, and you have to give Meiser Ani. If you follow Beis Hillel's opinion, it's still the second year, and you only have to give Meiser Sheni. So which one do you give? So what happens? Rabbi Akiva took off the esrog from the tree on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, v'nag by Beis Yisurin, and he gave both. He says, you know what? I'll be machmal like both. Echad kedivri Beis Shammai. He gave the Meiser Ani for the third year like Beis Shammai. Ve'echad kedivri Beis Hillel. And he also gave the Meiser Ani like Beis Hillel. The Meiser Sheni that is like Beis Hillel. So what do we see over here? These are two opinions that are a contradiction to each other. You have to make up your mind. It's either the second year or the third year. So you see that he's giving Meiser in both. He's being machmer for both, even though it is a contradiction. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, Gemara istapikle. Rabbi Akiva, the halacha, the tradition of what the halacha is, he had a sofik. V'lo yoda I Beis Hillel b'chad b'shvat Amor. He didn't know whether Beis Hillel is the one that said that on Rosh Chodesh Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos, or whether Beis Hillel is the one that said that on Chamishasa b'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos. So in other words, his suffix was not who you paskin like. He's not being machmed psak din. His chumrah was because he wasn't sure who is the one that said that Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos is on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Is it Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel? So Rabbi Akiva was all trying to follow one opinion. He's trying to follow Beis Hillel's opinion, but he wasn't sure what Beis Hillel's opinion is. So in such a case, when you're following one opinion, then you can be machmer to follow, to do two things, even though they're a contradiction. But, so therefore, so therefore he was machmer to give the meiser for both years, for the second year, for the third year. If you're going to try to be machmer two opinions, and you know exactly what each opinion says, and you're going according to two opinions which are a contradiction to each other, then you're considered to be a ksil. But if you're following the same opinion, then you're not considered to be a ksil.
The concept is
correct. Yes. Yeah, exactly. He didn't know what Beis Hillel said. He's trying to follow one opinion. Yeah, like by Dragon. There's a lot of cases where, if Rabbi Akiva didn't know, I imagine he didn't have who to ask. If I didn't know, or someone else didn't know, he probably have who to ask. But Rabbi Akiva probably didn't have what to ask. Then later the Kabbalah was nisbara somehow, but in the Rabbi Akiva's times, at least in that time period, there was no one to ask. Yeah, okay, so this was a small break of Eiruvin. Now we go right back into the discussion, b'negei to the Mavi. Ready? Sagt the Gemara, Yosef Rav Yosef Kamei Rav Huna v'Yosef v'Ka'amar, and he was sitting and he said the following halacha. Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav. So before in the Gemara we were discussing when you have a Mavoi that opens on both ends into a Reshus HaRabim. What's that called? A Mavoi Mefulish. It's open straight through into a Reshus HaRabim. Now we discuss a similar case as follows. Machlaikis, the whole argument, the discussion that we had earlier regarding the Mavi that opens up on both ends is Bisratya. That's Bisratya Mikan, Bisratya Mikan. A Sratya is basically a highway. You have a highway on both ends of the Mavi. So the Mavi opens on both ends into a Reshus HaRabim. Or Platya Mikan, Platya Mikan. Platya is also a Reshus HaRabim. It's an open big plaza, like a big, huge marketplace where people come there. Then there's the machlokes, how exactly you have to close off this Mavi, as we learned before. Aval Sratya Mikan. If on one side of the Mavi you have a Sratya, you have a big street or a highway. Or Bika Mikan. On the other end of the Mavi you just have a Bika, which is a Carmelis. You have a valley, which is a Carmelis. Or another case, Bika Mikan or Bika Mikan. On both ends of your Mavi it opens up into a Bika. It doesn't open up into a Reshus HaRabim at all. So then what do? Everybody will agree that how do you close off this Mavi to be allowed to carry there? On one side you put a Tzuras HaPesach, V'lechi v'kaira mikan. And on the other side you put either a lechi or a kaira. Okay? Huh? Yeah, we're talking about a regular straight Carmelist. Do they have a picture for this over here? I mean, it's a pretty simple case, but if you want to see a picture for this, just a second. So, yeah, you can take a look in picture Samach. Right? So it's picture Samach. On one end is Reshus HaRabim. On the other hand, it actually looks like it opens into the clouds in this picture. Yeah. But it opens into a Carmelis. Okay, that's picture Samach. Okay, pretty simple case. Sagt die Gemara weiter. Fragt die Gemara. Fragt die Gemara the Shaila. Where are we holding? Hashta. Now what did you say? Sratya mikan, ubika mikan. On one end it opens into a Reshus HaRabim. On the other end it opens into a bika, which is only a Carmelis. So what will be sufficient to close it off? A tzuras HaPesach on one side, and a lechi or a kaira on the other side. Bika mikan, ubika mikan. Then you give me the next case, where on both ends it's not opening into Reshus HaRabim. It's opening into a bika. Mibaya? Do you need to tell me that you don't need doors for this, or there's no argument about this, and you can close it off this way? What's the chiddush? It's pretty obvious that you can close it off this way. So the Gemara says, Hachi ka'amar. This is what he meant to say. Sratya mikan, ubika mikan. If you have a Reshus HaRabim that it opens up into on one end, and it opens into a bika, a Carmelis on the other end. Nase ke bika mikan ubika mikan. It's as if it opens on a Carmelis on both ends, and therefore a tzuras HaPesach on one end and a lechi or a kaira on the other end would be good enough. That's what it really means to say. In other words, it's not two different cases. The Gemara does this many, many times. When the Tana says two cases, and the second case is even less of a chiddush, it says that the second case is just an explanation for the case before. And that's the same thing over here. Now the Gemara says there was still another thing that was said here. So this is all being said. Rav Yehuda is saying it in the name of Rav. Messiah Rav Yehuda now concluded his statement and said as follows. Messiah Mishmei Rav Yehuda, so it was Rav Yosef that was sitting in front of Rav Huna and said it in the name of Rav Yehuda, and he said in the name of Rav Yehuda as follows: if a mavoi ends off into a rachba. What's a rachba? This is something we didn't have yet over here in Masechta Eiruvin. A rachba is the back lot of a house. We constantly talk about a chotzer. A chotzer is the front yard of a house, and a rachba is the back lot of a house. What's the difference between them? The difference is, at least in the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, the front yard was a place that people used much more often to come in and out of the house, to keep things there. That was always used. The back lot of a house was much less frequently used, and therefore it has a different halacha, as we'll see soon what this applies to. But here we're talking about we're talking about a mavoi that ends off into the back lot of a house. Okay, if you want to see the picture of this, how exactly huh? Oh, you have a picture in the Rashi. That's true. You have the picture in the Rashi, but if you want to see color, you could take a look in picture Samach Aleph, right? Picture Samach Aleph. So right over here, you have a mavoi. On one end, it opens up into a Reshus Harabim. On the other end, it opens into the back lot of two houses, and then it opens into a Reshus Harabim as well. So it is. So technically, the point over here is, it is open to a Reshus Harabim on both ends. A person that wants to walk through from one Reshus Harabim to another, he could go straight through. We're not talking about a rochba, a backyard, that's totally closed off. It's open into the Reshus Harabim. Okay, but that's the case we're talking about over here. Okay, so this is a mavoi that ends up into a rochba. Kol al rochba ein sarich klum. It doesn't have to have anything. It doesn't have to have the tzuras ha-pesach that we spoke about before. It doesn't have to have any of that. You're allowed to carry into the mavoi. You have to have the lechi by the opening of the mavoi into the Reshus Harabim on one end, but since the other end opens into a back lot of a house, even though it's all the way through, and that rochba opens into a Reshus Harabim, you don't need anything on that side. I mean, it doesn't say this in the Gemara, by the way. The Gemara doesn't clearly say that we're talking about a rochba that has an opening into the Reshus Harabim as well. But Rashi here says that must be what it's talking about, because if that back lot was closed off, it would be pashut. It would be obvious that you don't need anything on that end. So therefore, it's obvious that the Gemara means that it's straight through, because this entire Gemara here is talking about a mavi which is mefulish. Elamai, this is mefulish through a back lot of Reshus Harabim. Okay, so now what does it come out of here? What do we see over here from what Rav Yehuda said? What we see from what Rav Yehuda said is that you have a mavoi which goes straight through. It has a Reshus Harabim on one end and it has a Reshus Harabim on the other hand. But because it ends up in the back lot in a rochba before it goes into the Reshus Harabim, so it's considered to be like it's closed off. That's one chiddush we see. This is not called mefulish, and therefore you don't need anything there. The other thing we see over here is that Rav Yehuda was talking specifically about a rochba, not about a chotzer. Why was he talking specifically about a back lot of a house and not about a chotzer? The answer is there's a very big difference between a rochba and a chotzer. By a chotzer, there's a takana of chachamim that you can't carry from a chotzer into a mavoi without an eid of chatzeres or a shitufe muva'is. Because there's the people of the chotzer that use the chotzer, and the chotzer is owned by certain individuals, then the mavoi is owned by more people, by other people as well. So you can't carry from a mavoi to a chotzer without an eruv. A rochba does not have that takana of chazal. Because a rochba is not used frequently, Chachamim did not make that takana regarding a rochba. You can carry from a mavoi into a back lot of a house without having an eruv chatzeres, without having a shituf mavais. So therefore, Rav Yehuda chooses to speak dafka about a rochba, so there should be no issue of carrying from the mavoi into the rochba, or carrying even in the mavoi itself. If you don't have that shituf mavais, you're not allowed to carry even in the mavoi itself, because it's open into that chotzer, and there's no proper eruv there, you can't carry in the mavoi itself. That's what Rav Yehuda spoke specifically about a rochba.
Rochba can't have any entrances?
Yeah, it could.
Saying from the houses?
Yeah, it does. It has an entrance to the house. Of course it does. But because it's not used frequently, so therefore the takana of chachamim that they said regarding a chotzer, that it needs an extra eid of chatzeres or shituf mavais, does not apply regarding a rachba. Amalei Abayel Rav Yosef, Had Rav Yehuda. This last statement of Rav Yehuda, so it's not clear in the name of who he said it. The previous thing that he said in the name of Rav. But this, it's not clear in whose name he said. The Shmuel, he must have said it in the name of Shmuel. Why? The Rav, because if he said it in the name of Rav, Kashir the Rav ad Rav. This is going to be a contradiction to another statement that Rav said, Betarti, and on 2 points. The Omer Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav. There's another statement that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba said in the name of Rav. A very similar case to what we just spoke about, but with one difference, as we'll see. Mavoi shenifratz b'miluoi l'chotzer. A mavoi that has an opening in the back of the mavoi, it's completely open into a chotzer. So instead of saying that it's open into a rachba, he says that it's open into a chotzer. And then v'nifritza chotzer kenegdoi. And the chotzer also has an opening right across that opening into the mavoi. The mavoi is open straight across into the Reshus Harabim. Okay, it's the same thing that we had over here regarding the rochba, but instead of it being a rochba, it is a chotzer. Take a look in picture Samech Gimel, or in picture Samech Beis. Okay, picture Samach Beis, so you have a mavoi, and the mavoi on one end is open into a Reshus Harabim, and on the other end it's open into a chotzer. So it's not open into the back lot of the house, but it's open into the front yard of the house, and then it goes into the Reshus Harabim. So there is an opening that goes straight through. You can go from one Reshus Harabim and go straight through to the Reshus Harabim on the other side. It's mafulish, as you see it in picture Samach Beis. Okay, so what's the halacha in this case? What does Rav say? Says Rav, chotzer muteres. Inside the chotzer, you're allowed to carry. Not a problem to carry inside the chotzer itself. But umavoi aser. In the mavoi, you're not allowed to carry. Why you're not allowed to carry inside the mavoi? So at this point, the Gemara thinks the reason you're not allowed to carry inside the mavoi is because you can walk straight through this mavoi from one Reshus Harabim on one end to the other Reshus Harabim on the other end. So therefore, there's a mavoi that goes straight through. It's mufulish, and because it's mufulish, so therefore you're not allowed to carry there. So this is a question on what Rav Yehuda said before. Frek the Gemara, ve'amai, why is it also to carry inside the mavoi? Lehevi k'mavoi shekolo lerochba. Why isn't it the exact same thing as Rav Yehuda said before, like a mavoi that ends into a rochba? What did Rav Yehuda say regarding a mavoi that ends into a rochba? It's not considered to be a mavoi mufulish. Because it ends into a rochba before it goes into the Reshus Harabim, you're allowed to carry in the mavoi. It's not a problem. Okay? So that's one contradiction that we see over here. Rav over here is saying that because it goes straight through, so you're not allowed to carry in the mavoi. And Rav Yehuda said, even though you could go straight through, but because there's a break in between with the rochba, which is a Reshus HaYachid, you could carry inside the mavoi. The other detail which is different over here is, Rav Yehuda was talking about a rachba, specifically a rachba. Rav Yehuda says, you know why you can carry in the mavoi? Because it's a rachba. And a rachba is a place which is not frequently used, and therefore the takana of Erev Chatzeris doesn't apply. Rav over here was talking about a chotzer. So it's mashma that according to Rav, this distinction of rachba and chotzer doesn't matter. Rav Yehuda was specifically talking about rachba, not about chotzer. Rav doesn't make that distinction. Rav talks even about a chotzer. So therefore, on two counts, we see over here, if you're going to say that what Rav Yehuda said before was in the name of Rav, so this is a contradiction to what Rav says over here. So the Gemara says, Amalei, Anala Yadaina, I don't know in whose name Rav Yehuda said what he said. Uvda have bedure de reusa. There was an incident that happened. There was this kind of a scenario in a dura de reusa, means like a village of reusa of shepherds. Mavoi shekolo lerochba hava. There was a mavoi that was open on one end to the Reshus Harabim, and then on the other end into a back lot of a house. V'asala kamei de Rav Yehuda. This question was brought in front of Rav Yehuda. V'layatzrechei v'loi midi. And he said that you don't have to put anything by that end that opens up into the back lot of the house. You don't have to put anything there. So this is how Rav Yehuda paskened. In whose name did he say it? We don't know. V'i kashi mishmei de Rav, if you have a contradiction, if you're going to say that he was saying this in the name of Rav, to have him mishmei de Shmuel, so then you're probably right. So then he probably paskened so because he heard it in the name of Shmuel, not in the name of Rav. That's what the v'loi kashi midi, and you have no question at all. So there's the statement that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, and then there's what we have in the name of Rav. Now the Gemara says, no, there's another way of explaining this. Rav Sheshis le Rav Shmuel Barabe, but Rav Sheshis said to Rav Shmuel Barabe, v'omri le Rav Yosef Barabe, or he said it to Rav Yosef Barabe. We're misunderstanding the whole statement that Rav said over here. Asberulach, I'll explain to you. Kan she'irvoi, kan she'loi irvoi. That over here, the reason why Rav said, when you have a mavoi that goes straight through, and so Rav said you're not allowed to carry in the mavoi. You know why you're not allowed to carry in the mavoi? Not because it's mufulish, not because it goes straight through and you have a Reshus Harabim on each end. The reason is because the chotzer that it ends up into, there was no proper Erev Chatzeris made. And if there's no Erev Chatzeris made, and there's no Shittuf Mavois made together with the mavoi, you're not allowed to carry in the mavoi. That's the reason why you're not allowed to carry. Okay? Kan she'irvoi, in a case where you make an Erev, you'd be allowed to carry inside the mavoi. Kan she'lo yirvoi, the only reason you're not allowed to carry is not because it's mefulish, but because you didn't make an Erev. So the Rav, nami lo kasha. So even if we're going to say that Rav Yehuda said it in the name of Rav, it won't be a question either. Kan she'irvu b'nei chotzer and b'nei mavoi, and kan she'lo yirvoi. In a case where the people of the chotzer made an Erev with the people of the mavoi, so then you're allowed to carry. and the fact that it's mufulish does not matter. And kan shelo yirva. In a case where you did not make a native, you can't carry. So in other words, the point the Gemara is saying is, there's no pictures for this, but the point the Gemara is saying is, when you have a mavoi that's open through and through, and in the back part of the mavoi, it also passes through a chotzer, there could be two reasons why that would be asa to carry in the mavoi. One reason would be because it's a place to pass through, going from one Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim. It's mefulish. That would be one reason. Another reason is because there's an issue of Eid of Chatzeros. The people of the Chatzer did not make an Eid of Chatzeros with the people of the Mavoi. So the Havamin of the Gemara was that the issue is mefulish, that it goes straight through. Then there would be a contradiction in Rav's opinion. In one place, Rav says that it is considered to be mefulish, and in another place, Rav says it's not considered to be mefulish. Says the Gemara, no, it's definitely not considered to be mefulish. Because it ends up in a chatzer or a rachba, which is a ishus hayachid, we don't consider it to be mefulish. The only issue is a proper Erev Chatzeres was not made with the people of the Mavoi. And that's why you can't carry there. But if a proper Erev Chatzeres is made with the people of the Mavoi, you're allowed to carry there. Rachba doesn't. So in the case of the Rachba, you'll be allowed to carry. But in a Chatzer, you need an Erev Chatzeres. And if you don't have the Erev Chatzeres, you're not allowed to carry. Okay.